Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Jamie sent me a funny story, and I had not seen this. Now, this did not happen yesterday. It happened earlier this year. So the story's from 2020, but 2020 is almost over. So it's an old story from this year. But it happened in Australia, and I double-checked this to make sure it's real. This is not an Onion story. This is a real story, my friends. Man riding a horse stopped by police for using phone, and he was ticketed. The man was ticketed for using his phone on his horse. Now, again, this is from Australia, the Weekly Times, Sunshine Coast Daily. And I like I said, I was reading the article and I'm going, this is possibly one of those stories that's trying to be like an Onion story, but maybe it's not just that funny. But I mean, in real life, this is funny, okay? It's just not Onion level comedy. But the man was using a mobile phone while horse riding, and he had to go to court because he didn't have a hands-free device fitted to the animal. That's what the story says. So I made sure. I looked at the newspaper. I read some other articles from the Weekly Times of Australia. And it appears to be a newspaper that caters to the agricultural areas. And there's a lot of them in Australia. And so a man riding a horse and being ticketed for doing so would make news out there. So the man was riding along a rural NSW road, traveling at an estimated speed of 10 kilometers per hour, 10K. So he's doing about 6 miles an hour, holding a mobile phone to his ear when police stopped him. And this is also reported by the Tenterfield Star. So the police stopped him because they saw the man riding the horse, holding the phone. And now I'll admit, I'm amazed in this day and age. I saw somebody yesterday driving in traffic, holding a phone to the side of their head. And it's almost like that they're carrying around a fax machine or something. It's just so antiquated looking, holding a phone while driving. Now, I'm not saying that everybody needs to get hands-free headsets, but if you're driving, you do. So, a lot of cars have them built in now. And the ones that don't, if you're going to be talking on the phone, get a hands-free headset. They're not that expensive. They're fairly easy to use, and they're very convenient. It's easier to drive when you've got both hands. So the guy's riding his horse, and he's got a mobile phone held to the side of his head, and police stopped him. He then had to appear in front of a local court where the magistrate said, under the road rules, a horse is a vehicle, and he didn't have a hands-free device fitted to the horse. Now, I'm not sure if fitted to the horse is actually in the statute because the hands-free part is designed so that you can use both hands to work your vehicle, be it a horse or a car. And so the idea that it's not fitted to the horse, I suspect if he had his phone, for instance, in a belt clip and a headset and had both hands on the reins and he's riding along, the police officer realized he's talking on the phone and the hands-free device is fitted to his head, and the phone is fitted to his belt, I suspect he'd be okay there. Because the purpose of the law, I presume, is that you can have both hands free to work your vehicle. But the better part of this is that the horse is a vehicle under the law in that area. And one of the greatest discussions I have still, unfortunately, with a lot of people is people will log on to one of my videos where I talk about driver's licenses and whether you need one or not. And people will often try to argue and say that an automobile is not a vehicle. And they come up with these convoluted arguments about why an automobile is not a vehicle. It's household goods. Check the UCC. And the funny part is that here in Australia, here meaning in the story, no, I'm not in Australia. Here in the story, the horse is defined as a vehicle. And the defendant's attorney admitted that, in fact, the horse is a vehicle and the horse was in motion. So by definition, to be riding the horse on the roadway and the horse is in motion, you are driving a vehicle. Therefore, you can't do that with a handheld phone because you're required to use a hands-free phone if, in fact, you are operating a vehicle on the roadway. So I'm expecting someone to log in and say, and by the way, I invite you to do so, the man's not riding a horse. He's traveling. The horse is traveling. He and the horse are simply traveling the same direction at the same time, in the vicinity of one another. Perhaps the horse knows the way. Therefore, he doesn't need the man in the back to be actually working anything. And besides, the horse is not household goods under the UCC. It's not, by the way. So while the defendant's solicitor submitted that the matter was trivial, the 30-year-old man who got the ticket was inclined to plead guilty to using a mobile phone while riding a horse because he concedes that the horse was, in fact, in motion, doing 6 miles an hour. Now, in New South Wales, a vehicle includes an animal-drawn vehicle and an animal that is being ridden or drawing a vehicle, with a rider defined as the rider of a motorbike or animal-drawn vehicle includes to be in control of the animal, etc. So following this logic, if you were to find, I don't know, a bull. I've seen guys ride bulls on TV. They don't stand for very long for some weird reason, though. It's usually only 5 or 6 seconds they get thrown off. It doesn't seem like a smart thing to try to do, but they do it. I've seen them do it. So if you found a bull walking along the road in New South Wales, and you jumped on the back of that bull, and you were guiding it, and you got a phone call. Pick up the phone. Hello. What you doing? Riding a bull. Where? New South Wales. And all of a sudden, a police officer pulls up. Hang on a second. Cop just pulled over. Sir, what can I do for you? Are you talking on that phone, mate? Yes, I am. Why? You need to jump down and so I can give you a ticket because you are, in fact, operating a vehicle while riding that bull. And you'll notice it just simply says an animal, okay? It doesn't have to be a horse. It can be any animal, presumably, or any animal-drawn vehicle. And so they actually did, for instance, use, oxen to pull things. It's an extremely common work animal. And in fact, people who study history, it's kind of funny how people's imagination regarding what happened a long time ago is colored by things we've seen in TV and the movies and so on, which is not terribly accurate. And for instance, Michigan at one point in time was a swampy, forested land with many lakes and mosquitoes. And when European descendants showed up here, they decided to clear major portions of it for farming. And to clear the major portions of it for farming, if they didn't want to do it by hand, they'd use animals. And the most common animal being used was an ox. It's not a horse. And you'll often see illustrations of it being done, and they'll often show it being done by horses, because most modern Americans are more familiar with horses being used for work on a farm and not as familiar as oxen being used. So it's interesting. I've done a lot of metal detecting, and I often encounter old farmsteads, and I often find ox shoes, which are different from horse shoes. But again, that's because the ox were there in great numbers. So getting back to Australia, under the road rules, a horse is a vehicle, and he didn't have a hands-free device fitted it to the horse. And again, like I said, some of these nuances probably aren't as important, but the fact of the matter remains, the man was riding a horse, was stopped by police for using his phone, and he was not using a hands-free phone. So he didn't bother to make the argument about whether he needed a driver's license, whether he was traveling, whether the horse was household goods, and things of that nature. We'll leave that for another day. But the story's from the Weekly Times of Australia, and Jamie sent it to me. Thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Does anybody really know what time it is?